line and this bottom line are just a little more than 3 inches from top to bottom, about 9 centimeters. And then the measurement between these two lines, just a fraction under 3 inches from side to side. And then these two lines here, you can just sort of eyeball it. This is going to be showing us how large to make the heads of the two characters, and this is coming in somewhere around the waist. Now, I'm going to go ahead and put down the basic guidelines of the first character here on the left, and then I'll come back to explain a little bit about how I did it. Okay, so we've got the basic guidelines here in place, and I would encourage you to be creative and draw the character the way you want to, but the key thing is to get these hands in this location and at these lines here at this angle. That's going to be pretty important in terms of placing this piece of candy later on. Otherwise, I think you can just have fun with it and draw the character the way you prefer. Now, what I'm going to do is take a break from the time-lapsing and try to do some of the more detailed line work in real time and, give you advice as I do, which is, of course, the way I normally do these videos. So let's go ahead and start drawing the hair of this character. I really do believe that everybody should feel free to, alter this basic pattern any way they like and make the character look the way they want to. Maybe you could put yourself in as the person giving the Valentine, or I guess you could make yourself receiving the candy. Why not? It's all up to you in the end. But one thing I decided to do was to add a little bit of a nervous sweat drop up here because the character's so shy, even though he's giving this gigantic piece of candy. I think actually compared to his size, you have to think of this as quite a large piece of candy. Don't want to forget the blushies. I'll go ahead and do a little indication of those. And I think I'm just going to leave his eyes basically pretty white like this. Maybe give a little more body to this hair. Now, one thing you need to be aware of is the contour that you're creating here is going to eventually need to be cut out with a knife. So it's to your advantage to keep it simple and not get too carried away with, fancy spiky hair. I mean, you can do that, but it's going to add time to your task when later on when you need to take a knife and start very carefully cutting along the edge so as to pop this character out. Now, this straight vertical line, that I put in at the beginning, this is pretty important because I'm going to be putting in a prop fold-out that sort of folds back and allows that character to stand up straight. And I think if you did this line at a weird angle, it would be hard for you to do that. As I said, this line here is a rough indication of where the waist is. I guess I'll go ahead and draw the shoes. And I am going to make this full color, but unfortunately I think a lot of that is going to have to be done in time-lapse just to speed the video along. But I wanted you to see at least part of this in real time to give you a sense of some of the details and where you might place them. Now, what I'm going to do now, it's a little strange, but I'm going to zoom in here to this area because we're going to have to do some preparatory work here in terms of the paper that needs to fold back so that we can drop in that piece of candy at the end of the process. So hang on a second as I refocus the camera. Alright, so using time-lapse and my trusty ruler, I'm going to go ahead and put these lines in, but then I'm going to come back and explain the sort of measurements so that you can reproduce this yourself. Okay, so this somewhat unusual formation of lines is designed for placing this piece of candy later on. And the angle, everything really needs to be pretty close to what you see here if indeed you want to use the same piece of candy or type of candy. That is very common here in the United States. Of course, I know that my videos are viewed in lots of different countries, but basically you're measuring the width of that piece of candy and understanding that this is going to get cut out and folded back, and then this will be sort of propped back up to sort of hold it in place. Anyway, do your best to copy that if you can, and for now we can move on to drawing the basic guidelines of the female character over here. All right, now with this character, you can feel much more free to just sort of do your own thing, because this character is not actually needing to, hold the piece of candy. So there's no reason why her hands necessarily have to be in this position, or indeed for her to look like this at all. So feel free to play around and make it your own. Really with this whole project, but especially with these things that don't relate to, holding the piece of candy, which really does have to, I find, be something like this, or else it's just not going to work. Sadly, or indeed, you can find your own way of doing it. I'm a big fan of people finding their own way, but anyway, I'll show you the thing I came up with that worked for me in terms of coming up with this idea. So I'm going to go ahead and add her hairstyle. People laugh because in my videos, almost every time the female character has some kind of ponytail, and I can't resist. I'll just go ahead and do it again, guys. I really ought to be breaking out of this old habit, but somehow, I don't know. Valentine's Day just puts me in mind of the girl having a ponytail. This whole, my whole approach of the cartooning here is very trying to make it deliberately cute and simplistic, and something kind of retro, really, I think is the vibe I'm going for here. So I'm going to go ahead and, in keeping with that, give her a bit of a checker pattern here. And when we get into the coloring, you're going to see that I am basically trying to keep things to 2 or 3 different shades of color. Going to go for a somewhat monochromatic approach with this video. But I'd say the one thing that is important to remember in terms of this character is this one vertical line, especially down here near the leg. Because again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out from the paper a sort of a prop, that folds back and allows her to stand up and not, flop back over, as paper is likely to do without some sort of prop back there. Get some lines here for the socks, and basically I think we are done with this character. Now what I'm going to do is erase a little bit of the remaining guidelines and go in with some markers. It's going to be a combination of markers, maybe a little watercolor, certainly some colored pencils, and sadly, yeah, I think I will be doing this all pretty much in time-lapse, but I think I can come back with some pointers about my coloring technique. And then we get to the fun part of pulling out the X-Acto blade and actually cutting this out and seeing if it's going to work in terms of holding this little piece of candy. But first, let's get on with the color. Alright, well I finished up my coloring. My process is pretty elaborate. I used white gouache for the highlights, and of course you saw me building up things with the colored pencil quite a lot, but there's no need for you to do that. Keep it simple if you like, just markers or whatever you have on hand. And now we're going to move on to the next part of pulling out the X-Acto blade and cutting along these lines here. But before I do that, I want to bring out this protective mat here that I got at the art store. That's going to go underneath this paper so as to protect the table. Well, let's go ahead and move on to that next step. Now, I'm not going to do all of this real time because that would be incredibly boring, but I think I'll just start and show you a little bit of the technique. Make sure you have a brand new blade. I think that's key. You want to have nice, smooth lines, and the older your blade is, the more it's going to just be fighting with the page. And so you can see, I just wanted you to see this sort of speed, or lack of speed, with which I'm doing this. And I chose to make these outlines quite thick so as to make it easier for me to, accurately cut around them. You can see it already starting to come out. And this part in here, this is really, I think I should do this real time because it is the most important part. And you could use a steel ruler for cutting these lines. I'm going to just do it by hand so that you can see what I'm doing. Now I'm cutting this first line, which is, I hope I said before, about 2 centimeters from top to bottom. And this here is really just going to be a sort of a folded line, so I'm not really cutting there, but the rest of these lines I do want to, as carefully as possible. Looks like I actually messed up a little on that, but I think we can live with that. Cut all along these contours of this section, and this really is what's going to allow us to pop in that little candy at the end. Now what I'm going to do is just score here, that I'm not cutting all the way through. I'm just sort of pressing lightly with the blade so as to make it easy to fold later on. And then, yeah, I think that's really all you need to see. Maybe you will want to be aware of this line here. This is where I am going to fold back. So let's just go ahead and do that. I don't think there's any need for that to be super perfect or anything. But as I said, going kind of lightly along with your knife can make it easier for you to do a fold later on. When you need to, and then down across here, I think I will use my ruler for that. This whole thing here is going to have to be scored, and I'm going to cut this across, or cut this whole section out. And otherwise, yeah, let's just go ahead and in time-lapse finish the X-Acto blade time, and then we can get on to the big grand finale where I pop this baby out and see if we can make it stand up. Okay, well, I'm pretty much done cutting away the things I need to. I'm going to remove this piece here. And I did save a couple of things to do at the end here. Right here from the base of his feet across to this line, you are going to want to go ahead and cut that all the way through, because this is going to become the thing that sort of props him up. And then over here we need to do the same thing. Don't cut all the way across the feet, because we want her to stay attached to the rest of the paper. And I should say that this is cardstock quality paper. Bristol board really is what I'm using here. Over here, this is where we're going to want to be able to bend this back. And so you want to take the knife, and you can even turn the knife over so that you're just lightly scoring the paper to help it bend without cutting all the way through. And this will help you later on when you need to fold that back for putting in that little piece of candy. So this is an unusual circumstance for me. Oh, I guess I need to cut this out as well. Huh. Always forgetting stuff. But I didn't forget the blushies. Did you notice that, guys? I did manage to remember that. But we'll get this piece out of here in a second, and I'm going to have to reposition the camera so as to show what this looks like when it gets popped out and is standing up in 3 dimensions. And so give me a moment. I'll relocate my work here, and then we're going to go ahead and do the grand finale, turning this into a little pop-up card. All right, well, here we go. Let's see if we can get this guy to stand up. Throw that back. And then this, I don't know if you can see this, but this is what we need to fold back so that we get a horizontal surface and a sort of supporting vertical surface. And this one, just fold flat back. Alright, seems to be working. Now we're going to take the little Valentine sweetheart here, pull her up, and put the prop back. Alright, not bad, not bad. Let's see how that's looking. All right, now it's time to go get the candy. All right, well, here's the candy. Sort of sneak in here behind, see if we can put it where it needs to be. And there you go. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thanks so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll be back with another one.